We take a single episode of a science fiction TV series and overanalyze it to within an inch of its life. This is the Fusion Patrol Podcast. Welcome to the discussion. Hello and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Ben.
And today we are looking at the 1977 TV series, Fantastic Journey from the Dawn of Time. And this episode 2, Atlantium. Varian, Fred, and Scott arrive at Atlantium, only to discover the other people in their party, whom we've already forgotten, including Scott's father, have already been sent home. Oh, happy day! Soon they shall be reunited. But all is not what it seems, and the Atlantiumians need a new brain, and Scott's is just the right size. Will our heroes be duped by these duplicitous Atlantiumians? Or will the alien Leanna and her amazing pussy save Scott from a fate worse than death? In the end, they leave the city to search for another way home. Leanna comes with them, leaving her pussy behind. Okay. So, what'd you think of this episode?
Well, I dare say that had I watched what you just described, it would have been infinitely more entertaining. But I enjoyed it nonetheless.
Boy, it is Man from Atlantis level there at bits, though, isn't it?
There are bits, but given, I'm sorry, I'm still trying to get the taste of Naked Montague out of my mouth, and yes, that I deliberately chose those words.
We may still have valleys so low in this show too that they could make, but I mean, just sort of the kind of general Man from Atlantis. It is that sort of 1970s.
Oh, it has that feel. No question.
Sort of vapid science fiction.
This is mindless. This is popcorn fare.
Yeah,
at its finest.
So I think the first thing that we should notice here is that after the pilot, it was determined. I think we mentioned this last time, that in the pilot they sort of showed it to some people and decided they didn't like it, whether it was the network executives or what, and they made some changes. Even as before the pilot aired, adding the bits with Gary Collins looking at them and going, I think we found a brain, whatever it was that they did. But very, very awkwardly at the beginning of this episode, it's just like, the characters we don't like, they're gone. They've gone home. Yay.
Oh yeah, it was. They were brushed off to the side. It's like they immediately picked out who they wanted their protagonists to be.
Mm-hmm. And the nameless, the two nameless women and Scott's father, who's also virtually nameless, except he's Scott's father, were gone.
Well, they were terribly uninteresting.
It's true, they were. They were uninteresting characters.
I mean, the father was the most interesting of that bunch, and that's not saying a lot. I mean, he had nothing to offer at this point.
No, Varian had supplanted him in every capacity, morally, intellectually, in capabilities. I mean, it just, you put a man from the future there, and he's going to override your authority. I think that was pretty obvious. But still, it's just a very weird way to do it.
It is very abrupt.
And we have to have that scene where Varian scans the vibes off the letter that Scott's father left behind him to see if he's
that's really
real.
His father.
Yeah,
if his father really wrote that. Yes, I suspect that is something we will. That maybe not in exactly that manner, but he refers to it as being able to read the aura. And if memory serves, that's something which will be revisited from time to time.
Oh, the chariots of the gods and the New Age flower power, pyramid power stuff was seriously in evidence in this episode. I mean, they're really...
Well, but you remember, as we said, it was hot. Series really is a reflection of what was very popular in society at that time. So, yeah, we saw a lot of that kind of stuff in culture. So it's not entirely surprising.
It'd be zombies now.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, that'd be the big thing now.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, if you look at it from that standpoint, is that what's popular then is mystical powers and bettering yourself and
Very new agey.
The stuff that could make the world a better place in theory, or that a bigger universe. And now it's just you're going to die and your body's going to be a mindless brain eating,
we've
rotting
really
corpse. We've really
turned around and
septic tank of the world.
Yeah, we're really into dystopia now.
Yeah.
And even though there's some of the futures and some of the other societies that this series is going to present with us are not exactly purely utopia, Varian is that one link to the better future.
Mm-hmm. It is a better future.
We will be forever reminded of that. And as flower powerish and as new agey as it can be, I'm not taking offense to it in so much in that I like the idea that television is telling us that humanity could have achieved something better.
It's like they ripped that off straight from some other
Star Trek
show.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, including Varian's prime directive.
Yes, which he breaks.
Yes, he broke that.
Well,
but then
it was self-defense.
So does Kirk. So
he's in good company.
This prime directive just makes for bad stories, so you have to break it to have any kind of drama. It's like
that's true. And I would agree with that. I mean, it's nice to have the prime directive, kind of presented to us, in that it shows that you're a person of moral and you have principles, but it's okay to break those principles in dire situations. And admittedly, Varian was in such a dire situation.
So let's start with the first question. Did the others make it back, or are they dead?
I have every reason to believe they made it back.
So these basically evil people in Atlantium, and they are, I mean, they're duplicitous from the word go for Scott, Fred, and Varian. I mean, they're nice to them, but they're planning on killing Varian and Fred, not sending them back. They're going to take Scott's brain. It's hard to put that with okay, we'll send those people back, but these others, we're going to kill them and take their brain.
They need to gain Scott's trust. And while they could have probably pulled a fast one, and
easily,
I mean, I tend to believe that I don't think it's so much as that they're evil. I think that they're totally amoral.
They just walked into the disintegrator machine, and said, "Okay, you're going back home."
I don't know. I've always believed that. Again, it's not a question of them being totally evil. It's they are without any moral compass.
There was that scene that might have been at the end of last week's episode where the three of them were sort of discussing this, and I think, the main bad guy said something about killing him, and the other guy, I think the other guy, who oddly enough is the one that you'd think would be the main bad guy, said something where we could just send him back, or we don't have to kill him, or something like that. Like he was kind of being not a complete mustache twirling villain, but they didn't really explore that any, and there really was no evidence presented one way or the other. The reflecting pool that they would go look in, was that showing reality, or was that just what you wish to see?
It's a good question. We saw stock footage.
Yeah,
we know that.
That too.
So it could be simply a reflection of what they wish.
Oh, they're fine. It's like, yes, the remembrance of before you left waving at you is, well, Scott wasn't exactly on top form in this episode, so.
No, he wasn't. But the other thing that tends to convince me that the other three were sent home is something that the source says later on, and when its very existence is at its most threatened, the source reveals that it could get them all home. It really could, and by killing it, it would be impossible for it to do so. And again, I come back to the idea that I don't think the source is, or anything else in the Atlantium, is necessarily evil. It is just without any sense of morality. So it really becomes a classic case of ends justifying the means. There's no sense of remorse for any action. It would kill the other three if it felt it served their purpose. But what better served their purpose, killing them or just sending them home?
So why did it make the fake Scott to haul them out to kill them when it could have just made the fake Scott, kept them busy for a while they sucked Scott's brain out, and then nicely sent the three of them home, and then the fake Scott just disappears when they go back. And, they'd never be able to get there. They'd never be able to do anything. Nobody gets killed, except Scott, of course. And he's not exactly killed, but it's when they set up to intentionally lead Fred and Varian to their death that made me think, yeah, no, they're actually, and if they're immoral, then there's no reason that the source couldn't be lying. Oh, I could really send you back. I really could. Don't kill me.
That's true.
So,
it's very possible that.
Boy, are we digging
killed.
We are digging deep for something deep in this episode, aren't we?
Yeah.
Or it could just be bad writing. So, let's turn our all-seeing eye to Leanna's pussy. Why was that cat in that episode? Why did they introduce the alien who has the cat familiar and then walk away at the end and leave the cat familiar behind?
That has me very, very perplexed because I'm going to jump the timeline here.
Yeah.
I could have sworn that cat traveled with her.
All I can remember is publicity stills of her holding the cat, but those could have all been from the pilot. But think of that poor cat. This cat can communicate with her, and she's left it behind in a city full of people who barely have brains left because of the under, and they can't communicate with it. That poor cat. That's the cruelest, meanest thing I've ever seen.
Unless they felt that taking it along on their journey was even more dangerous.
A budget buster. It's a budget buster. We got to have the cat wrangler, and then we got to have I think the cats have to have classes during the day, and they can only work so many hours. It's union rules.
But as I said, I could have sworn that in later episodes, Leanna had her cat. So I'm completely. I was very surprised by that ending. But
of course, it could be just as bad as the departure of the parents, the father and the women. In the next episode, the cat will show up and go, "I followed you. I was lonely. Oh, all right, you can come along."
Which I think is exactly what we're going to get. Sadly, I think that's how they're going to rationalize it.
We really can't plan for the next episode, can we? Until we get to the next episode. Then we can retroactively plan some story to make it fit. Yeah.
Welcome to 70s television writing.
Well, it's yeah. 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 Okay, well, that's what bugged me about the cat. It was a convenient plot device for her, although, frankly, it wasn't utilized very well.
Well, the idea of the way the cat works with Leanna is one thing. What perplexed me is that how this cat was able to completely roam free through the city and nobody noticed it. Yes, cats can be very stealthy, but I didn't see any evidence of any other animal life inside Atlantium. So a cat, in my opinion, to anybody who's even slightly observant, would sort of stick out.
It did sort of stick out in the scenes it was in. And it seems like there was a scene where the cat did something, or maybe Leanna did something. I don't know. The cat could have done something to stop Scott from being taken, or the cat ran to Leanna, and Leanna, instead of going to save the day, rushes way out hours into the desert to find the other guys to come back to rescue. There's so many things in this didn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, because you need to have your plot complications. So yes, there's a lot of really weird story writing going on here.
And what about that subplot with the unders, and not just the subplot of the unders, who are this oppressed minority being brain controlled by the source, and doing all the very hard gardening down in the hydroponics lab, and that one guy who they were trying to help escape. Just one. That they wanted to help escape.
Well, because he had managed to attain self-will.
and that went nowhere.
Oh,
'cause-
it was meant, I think, only to serve the idea that escape is futile. But again, this is 70s writing. I mean, it's a 70s audience. When it comes to science fiction television, they're not very sophisticated, are they?
No.
So
Science
things like
fiction-
that can easily, they'll be accepted by the TV viewing public. But when someone today with a bit of a more scrutinizing eye takes a look at it, a lot of the plot holes just really begin to show up. I mean, like, one thing that really bothers me is, so you're down under, you've got all your slave gardeners doing their gardening, and there's just Leanna just sitting there who looks completely, totally out of place.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking, wouldn't somebody notice this person who is just sitting there doing nothing, not dressed like everybody else in the city? How can you not notice her?
Perception filter. I don't know. That crossed my mind a few times too. It's like she's just wandering around the city, no apparent purpose. So I guess visitors show up in Atlantium all the time, and they have no problem leaving.
Although when she was trying to run away from guards, she was asked for some sort of identification.
And then she used her Jedi mind trick on her. On
him to make him black out.
Which fortunately she has that, and she's from a high gravity world, so she's got super strength.
Super strength and endurance. She doesn't get winded.
Yes.
She's Supergirl.
She's got impressive lungs. That's all I have to say. Yeah, I got nothing else on this. Oh, no, I do have something else on this. It's got nothing to do with this, but it does, because I happen to be reading a book, which, shock and dismay. These Are the Voyages, which is a 3-volume set on the history of Star Trek. 1 volume per each year. And I've been going through the early parts, so you have to understand this is late. It's 60s. And it's talking about the television culture of, what led to getting Star Trek in its place. And 1977 is not that far removed from 1967.
Not
and
really, no.
It's very clear that the network game doesn't get science fiction, and it doesn't really... It's so motivated by its own self-interests that it's really hard to look back on it as our perspective is like, I want TV shows that I want to watch. But that's not the system that they're working on. Even though that's the illusion you get with ratings and all that stuff, that's the marketing and the advertising. This is really just sort of, they're bumbling around in the dark looking for programs that meet their agenda, and science fiction is just a wacky thing. They're not interested in science fiction. They're interested in programs that get the eyeballs. And so...
Which sadly this series didn't do.
Well, we're looking at these shows like Man from Atlantis and Fantastic Journey and Logan's Run and Planet of the Apes. These are all this era of time. And it's really just sort of, they're trying to find their way. They're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And it's really hard when I'm looking at that Star Trek to say, well, what science fiction shows had actually been on television, and it's like a handful at all. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about some of the big guns too, like Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, and then lesser lights like Lost in Space and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. There's just not much. There's not much history here, and so they don't know what they're doing. They're not. And these people aren't science fiction writers. They're just television writers, and they're just. I don't want to say hacks, but they're just jobbing writers whose job it is to. Here's your premise. Give me a story. Okay, give me my $700 per script. And
I think part of the problem, and you did sort of touch on some of this with Fantastic Voyage and with Man from Atlantis. I mean, we're clearly talking about NBC, and of course NBC has a marvelous history in terms of how they bungled Star Trek in such a terrible way. I mean, you talk about how they had no idea how to do science fiction, and they couldn't find anybody. Well, the problem is that they did. They did sort of find somebody. I mean, not so much as a writer, but in terms of more as a focal point, and that was Roddenberry. I mean, he was able to at least get the talent together so that really good science fiction could be done. The problem is that, excuse me, the network didn't want to deal with him. They didn't want to deal with somebody of his like. They wanted somebody that worked more towards their ends, that I don't want to say that they could control, but possibly just some kind of showrunner that worked more along the lines of their agenda. And Roddenberry wasn't that. But if they wanted quality science fiction, clearly he was the guy to go to. So, again, it's not really a matter of that they wanted science fiction. I don't think they did. I don't think the network really cared. In fact, to be really honest, I'm actually really surprised that this series even made it on. Mm-hmm. I mean, because there was a complete void of any science fiction, of any substantial science fiction, or even insubstantial science fiction going on. I mean, we had Man from Atlantis, and then the other things, other television shows. I mean, they were all being syndicated. But and then of course, we said the two Irwin Allen shows, or actually three if you want to count Time Tunnel.
Time Tunnel. I think Time Tunnel came later. I think it's the later.
I believe it did.
Of the three.
Yes, it was the last of the. No,
well,
Lost
let's not forget
was.
Land of the Giants.
Oh, that's right, Land of the Giants. Actually, Lost in Space was the last of the three. I think I read that somewhere. Not sure.
It killed them all.
Maybe. But in any event, all you got to do is look to those Irwin Allen shows, and God, they're awful.
I kind of like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Oh, God.
Admittedly, some of the inflatable aliens were a little bit over the top, but...
yeah, well, when we decide to cover Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and Fusion Patrol, I will then really run wild on all the things that I found wrong with it, including the one gaping error that popped up every single episode. But be that as it may, the networks really had no idea how to present the viewing audience with quality science fiction, nor do I think they even cared.
Correct. They did not care.
They didn't care, which is why we got this.
Yeah, you're definitely right. They didn't care. It's not just and I don't mean that in terms of we just don't care. It's that their goal had nothing to do with trying to present something interesting in the way of what people classically associate with science fiction, which is thought-provoking ideas in perhaps allegorical settings.
Heck, the film studios are still burdened with that today. It's all about what can they do to copy, or what can they do to capitalize on somebody else's success, thinking that will, all of a sudden the Brinks truck will just, back right into their front door.
Well, I was reading a fascinating article about this weekend's phenomenal flop and how bad that's going to be for Hollywood. The Jupiter Rising. Jupiter Rising?
Jupiter Ascending.
Jupiter Ascending tanked.
As did Seventh Son.
In a phenomenal way, but at least supposedly Jupiter Ascending was a sort of the Wiskowskis, I can't even pronounce it, Washkakovies.
Yeah, them. The Matrix guys.
The Matrix guys
people.
Trying something outside the standard mold of sequel, remake, standard, tried and true formula, and by tanking
they had always been really big on taking manga or anime and turning that into live action. That's what they did with Matrix, Speed Racer,
which tanked.
Yeah, and I loved it. Sorry, but I did. So yeah, for them to kind of go into Jupiter Ascending, that was really outside of their wheelhouse.
And so now they've got, there's talk of them being probably have to push back down to lesser blockbuster studio productions for a while.
But then, like I just heard today, and this again goes to show how studios are not really concerned with creating anything of quality. They're more concerned with marketing making
audience.
Money, and that is what they want to do with the next Star Trek film. Mm. They want to turn that into another Guardians of the Galaxy because that was such a huge monster hit in 2014.
I heard that. I haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not that I just don't like going to movies. It's just I'll see it when it comes out on something accessible.
Hello, several months now.
Yeah, well, it hasn't reached free as far as I can tell on Netflix or Hulu.
Oh, good God!
But I know that's part of the reason I brought Simon Pegg in, was to kind of spice up some of the humor in the writing.
That's true. Yeah, he will be doing the writing for the Star Trek 3. And that just, again, goes to this idea that studios have no concept.
But you could totally do this. I mean, we're way off track here, but it's Fantastic Journey. Who cares? You could totally do that with Star Trek, because we have episodes of Star Trek, and I hate to use tribbles because I'm not a Tribbles fan. I don't hate it, but I'm not a Tribbles fan. But
well, it's a bit
Shore Leave. You have a few episodes of Star Trek where humor is used effectively, and it still tells a story.
To the show.
That's
it's organic to the show, and it does not take anything away from
Simon Pegg might be able to do it.
Maybe
he is a fan.
He is a fan, but will the studio accept it? Because remember, they want... See, and again, you have not seen Guardians of the Galaxy, so you don't quite know exactly the tone of the movie that they want. Guardians of the Galaxy and Star Trek, even at its most amusing, are light years away from each other.
Yeah, I get the tone of the movie. That much is pretty clear from the trailers.
I mean, there's no way that he could possibly swing something like that. So again, we come back to the studio doesn't really seem to care about wanting to create a viable property. I mean, I remember when, and yeah, we're way off the topic, but I think this is more interesting. I remember when Star Wars first came out, and Michael Eisner, who was the head of Paramount at the time, was like, we got to do something. We need to have something that we can put out there that's really big. What do we have that we can put out there? And then somebody kind of whispered, don't we have something called Star Trek? And of course, that's kind of annoying because, again, Star Trek, Star Wars, not the same. But the studio was going to go after it anyway.
They're 50% the same.
What? With the word star?
The star, for crying out loud. I mean, how could they get much closer?
They're 50% different. Wars and Trek. One's about journey and exploration. The other one is about blowing things up.
Journeys, exploration, and blowing things up. I've seen all the Star Trek films. I think it's about blowing things up. Most of them are about blowing things up. Maybe not the one with the whales, although blowing up the whales would be kind of funny, or Star Trek the Motion Picture. But I think in Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, Final Frontier, it's all about blowing stuff up. So I think they've done fairly well with blowing stuff up, actually, although not, not true to the Star Trek spirit.
That's my point, is that it's not exactly in line with the vision that Gene had. So, again, they're trying to pigeonhole a product, thinking that this is what your audience is going to go for. I mean, this has been going around, especially with sci-fi genre or fantasy genre, television, movies, it doesn't matter. This has been the constant fallback idea that a lot of studios have, because most of them don't get it.
All of them don't get it. Or we don't get it.
Or we don't get them?
Well, we don't get yes, okay.
I mean,
yes,
granted,
we don't get it.
There is a business end of this that we may not be understanding.
We're not caring about. I mean, just like they don't care about the science fiction end of it, kind of speaking, we don't care about the business end. I mean, we can pay lip service to, I think they'd make a lot of money, and that's the kind of thing that they'd want. But that isn't the way the business works. And so for all our pie in the sky, when we say, science fiction ought to be about this, it's like there is a very real possibility that science fiction like that just isn't going to make it into the movies, possibly ever.
Although Marvel has its own film studio now, and that's what they've been cranking out. They've been cranking out these movies, and Guardians of the Galaxy, they didn't make a movie thinking that they were going to market something. They made a movie that they felt that they wanted to see and that their audience wanted to see. They put their people first.
I guess that's one way to look at it. They made a comic book. Comic book's a pretty standard I'm not denigrating comic book, but I mean a comic book has a format and a formula and a style, and Marvel's making their comic books, and I will admit that they're doing a fair job of making comic books, unlike, for example, the 1970s Spider-Man TV series with Nicholas Hammond.
That was a horrible thing.
Or even The Incredible Hulk.
Well,
not a comic book. Wait, no, but good show, but not a comic book, right? Would you agree?
It was not a comic book series, no.
But films like Iron Man and Guardian of the Galaxy are a much more faithful adaptation of the comic book genre.
Spiritually speaking, yes.
Okay, good. I just don't yet see them really making science fiction movies. I see them making comic books. So Marvel Studios has not yet done that.
Well, I'm not specifically okay.
And we can debate whether Star Wars is a comic book or science fiction, but
well, I'm really using the term in a very, very broad manner here, in including like Guardians of the Galaxy with the sci-fi mix. But in most cases, I mean, so okay, well, let's exclude Marvel. I mean, then we come back to the basic premise that the studios are all about making a buck. And granted, I understand that you have to make money if you want to stay in business, and that's the business model. You have to make money, but at what point do you sacrifice quality and creative output just for the sake of thinking about the bottom dollar?
Well, I'm gonna have to go on the cynical side and say that there is nothing more important to them than the bottom dollar. Nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. And so here's my question: the reason we've had this with Star Trek, that they have an edict that says basically you really can't leave Earth because women see a trailer set in space instead of Earth, and this is the studio executives, not me saying that, and they don't want to go see the movie. And if they don't want to see the movie, then their dates don't get to go see the movie. And if their dates don't get to see the movie, then only single guys without dates
only 14-year-old boys will get to go see the movie.
And that's not a big enough audience to get what they want, so therefore they know they're going to get the 14-year-old boys by putting a phaser in it or a spaceship of any kind. So then they have to start throwing in the elements. This is, we've got to keep it on Earth, and we've got to keep it recognizable, and we've got to have this, and it's that formulaic thing that puts it all together, get the eyes on. But so here's my question, just kind of going with that notion, and trying to also tie this into our dire 1977 TV series Fantastic Journey. In this day and age, because I think back then there was a little bit more creative in movies, there was a little bit more risk taking, there was a little bit more ability to go out on a limb and make a film that wasn't what everything else was, because you're just making one film, and if you had an output of films during the course of the year, if one of them didn't work, well, it was worth a try, and you get some artistic integrity and going. But now it's just the opposite. Movies have to be big to justify the huge investment in them for relatively short return. You got 2.5 hour shot, and you've got to get people to go to it. You've got to get people to go to it more than once and pay for it. And television, because of all the dozens and dozens of networks, the audiences are no longer what they used to be. So a successful TV program is actually much less audience. So does that make television a better medium now for science fiction than it did in 1977?
If that's a legitimate question, I would say TV is a better medium for that.
Well, yeah, it's a legitimate question.
I mean, I would look to Star Trek again. When is Star Trek at its most faithful? When it's a movie where you have this really, really short plot where you've got to introduce your antagonist, set up your plot, and then come up with a big bang finale because you're on a big screen, so it's got to be big. It's got to be big.
Big. That's right. It's got to be spectacle. You got to get people out of the house and actually drive down there and spend $15 for a bucket of popcorn, and another $7.50 for a Dixie cup of soda, and parking and exorbitant ticket prices. Yeah, it's got to be big. It's got to be a spectacle. It's got to be Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey's Circus.
Absolutely. Or on the other hand, though, take a look at Star Trek: The Classic Series when it was on television, and look to very thoughtful episodes that forced you to look at things in a different light. And the first episode that came to mind was The Enemy Within, the whole Jekyll Hyde and the duality of man. I mean, there's now you've created something that is a place for conversation. Instead of just going around the water cooler, oh, wow, did you see that movie last Friday where the Enterprise blew that ship up? Wow. As opposed to, what did that episode do to you? How did that make you think?
I wonder if that's true. I mean, I don't disagree that, yes, those were deeper, and clearly that was Roddenberry's intent, because he was after Jonathan Swift, was who he apparently was mimicking or going for. That was what he wanted, the ability to tell a story and layer something in between it, because it's fantastical in its way. We have several well-documented quotes on that from the era. But did it work? I mean, of the people watching the show, how many people did go form podcasts? No, wait. How many people did go where after an episode they talked about it for an excessive period of time? Now,
well, today they do, obviously.
How many people at the water cooler after the episode of Star Trek were talking about the moral dilemma of man being right and wrong, or were they in fact actually just, that was fun? Blasting the Romulans. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the cultural milieu was. I was a kid,
I was too, but I remember reading a lot of stories, especially when Star Trek really made it big in syndication. And people were really drawn to those morals. They were drawn to the ideas. That's what really intrigued them, not the big flash. I mean, granted, when I first saw Star Trek, I was 5. So yeah, I was more into, like the ship-to-ship battle between the Enterprise and the Romulan ship in Balance of Terror. I mean, I remember that episode vividly as a kid. So yeah, those things stuck out at me, but there was that older generation, and they kind of saw, they were seeing something different. But at least based on the interviews and stories that I've read.
Okay, so you see them as the older generation, and they were, right? But what we also know from the demographics when they figured it out was that Star Trek was a huge hit with college kids. And if there is anybody on this planet more pretentious about their own big ideas, it's kids in college.
Well, obviously, wouldn't this be talking to them?
Exactly. That's exactly my point. So, but again, were they the only ones watching? It was big hit with them, and those are the people who we now hear interviews with. Oh, this is, so important because these were the causes and the justice and the things that I was fighting for and believed in. But again, Mr. and Mrs. America, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. There's a black woman on the show. I just don't like it. Don't like it at all. I mean, it's so hard to put yourself in that mindset from that era. But clearly, the executives, now understanding the Star Trek demographic, are trying to target young-ish people.
Do they understand the demographic, though?
They did. By 1977, they did understand the demographic, because this is when they... I doubt that. No, I know for a fact that they had begun to understand the demographic of the reruns of Star Trek.
I think they understand the demographic existed, but I don't think they understood the mindset, because they were not putting together a good product.
No, they didn't understand the audience. They understood what the audience was.
Right. They understood the audience was there.
So they are now going for youngish people, and again, this is a prime age for this new age BS, and they're just feeling their way around here.
Well, yes,
badly.
You're right. You are right, and they did understand that there was some kind of an audience there, because, I mean, that'll be the only explanation for television shows like Man from Atlantis and like Fantastic Journey and all the Irwin Allen shows. That's the only possible explanation why these shows could have existed. Because, as I said last week, or the last time we talked about Fantastic Journey, when I started watching it, I was glued to it for one very simple reason. It was there. and there wasn't anything else.
Well, and that's the kid audience. Well, you were kind of old.
I was in high
77.
school.
Yeah, you were old man in 77.
Bite me.
I was 13 and I didn't watch it, which is weird. It must have been on up against something that when you only had one TV.
It was up against Welcome Back, Kotter, and I think the Waltons.
Yeah, it was never the Waltons in my house. That show was the anti TV show.
So the other television show was Welcome Back, Kotter.
Yeah, that probably was. Because he always told that joke at the beginning of the episode that was always quite good. I always liked that. And sometimes at the end of the episode.
At the end of the episode, there was a good joke there, too.
Yeah. But in the middle, it was
In the middle was all the sweat hogs. Up your nose with a rubber hose.
Yeah, we have railed off on. So, anyway, fantastic
have
journey.
we ever.
the derailure episode.
Yes.
I mean, there's just nothing. There's nothing here in this episode.
Well, there isn't, but the only reason why I gave this a positive review is because, and I think I mentioned this when we talked about part 1, and that is this episode, or the pilot, the two-parter, had been edited into a 2-hour movie. And it was seen on USA Network, and I remember when I saw it listed in the TV guide, I thought, oh man, I gotta watch this. And it was on at some stupid hour in the night. Of course, it was on because no one else would watch it. So I set the VCR, recorded it, watched it the next day, and thought this was the worst piece of crap. I mean, and I kept thinking, how on earth could I have liked this thing? So then I went into this two-parter, with our pilot and then with this one, really expecting to hate it. And in a really odd way, I did not. I don't know if it's got something to do with the editing. I don't know if I'm feeling a sense of nostalgia. I mean, and these are serious questions that I'm asking myself. I don't know. Like I said, I remember loving it as a kid, but watching it now, just as I did when I first saw the episode, I really found myself just waxing nostalgic. It's corny, badly, with some of its writing, acting, and direction. But it was not as horrible as I had originally feared. So, I realized that I'm entering into some really, really old waters, as I'm going to be seeing episodes that I'd only seen once before, and I got a funny feeling that those episodes are just going to really suck in a bad way. But these two had a nice bit of a popcorn 70s kitschy sci-fi flair to it. So I think the only reason I really liked it so much was purely for the 70s nostalgia.
Well, I was at Goodwill today. I think I saw some pants with the flared legs.
But they're not sci-fi.
They were glittery. I think they were gold, possibly lame. So anyway, I'm.
Are you speaking to the nerd in me or the gay nerd in me?
I was the 70s nerd, actually, not
because there's no way in hell I would wear those.
Yeah, it's not grabbing me. I gotta say, so far it's really not grabbing me. I don't know. Like I said, I don't believe I watched it on the first go through, or if I did, I only watched bits of it. And really, Varian is kind of annoying me because of this sort of.
He's a bit preachy.
Yes, this future guy preachy thing, and he just hasn't got the Captain Kirk thing going to pull it off.
No, he's too much of a pacifist.
And Fred is pointless, and Scott's annoying. And
if I remember right, Scott becomes less annoying because he will grow up really, really fast in this series. I remember that.
So, I can only hope Leanna is a better character. She's certainly prettier than the others, but then that's not a whole lot to judge your characters by.
She's not the world's greatest actress.
Well, from another planet, they have different emotions than. Yeah.
Well, actually, to be honest, I think they were trying to write that in, maybe to justify her.
How about that eyeball thing she does?
Oh, that's good.
I tried to do that. I can't. I cannot do that.
It makes me dizzy. I get vertigo.
That was weird. I wonder if they hired her because of that.
It's very possible. That's kind of alien looking. You're hired.
You're in. Yeah. Well, I don't even know what next week's episode is, but
Not a clue.
It'll surprise us when it gets there, and I'm sure it'll be epically exciting.
I don't think it's the one that introduces Rodney McDowell yet. I think he comes in like episode 5.
Spoilers. Anyway,
I'm sorry, I was jumping the timeline there.
That's when Cornelius from Planet of the Apes makes a guest appearance in the story. I was like,
no.
Actually, is he Cornelius in the Planet of the Apes TV series?
No, he's Galen.
Galen, that's it. Yes.
How did you not remember that? Shame on you.
Well, because
I know
Cornelius
why.
came
Because
to
the
mind.
series was really awful.
I have it. I've got it.
It was bad.
It was bad. Although that one with a hang glider. Oh, we're off track again.
Whoop, there we go. Well, hey, it's not hard with this. I mean, even though I like the series, it's much more fun to go off track with it.
And that's what Fusion Patrol's about. It's that after-episode discussion that just goes wherever it needs to go. So, Ben, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
And listeners, I hope you'll join us all again next time on Fusion Patrol.
Cheers.
Fusion Patrol is a Lone Locust production. Like us, leave us a review on iTunes. Or stop by and visit at our website, fusionpatrol.com. Find us on Facebook or Twitter. Search for Fusion Patrol. Or just drop us a note at feedback@fusionpatrol.com. Our music is Fight the Future by Amber Wolf.